Real people, real opinions, Real Talk Radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.
Ireland's classic hits.
Last night on the show, we had Laura Cathcart-Robbins. We spoke to Laura, who was an addiction expert, an author, who had also had a podcast called The Only One in the Room. The concept of her podcast was that each guest is unusual and had done something extraordinary, for example, and they were the only one in the room or the only person in the room that would have done that, like won an Olympic gold medal or, had 400 million kids or something like that. I think the example Laura gave last night was of a guest she had on who was the only one in the room who had a brother who murdered somebody. Anyway, it strikes me that our next guest tonight certainly suits the premise of the only one in the room, because Chrysta Bilton is an American writer who lives in Los Angeles with her husband and 2 children. And her first book is a memoir released in 2022, and it's called Normal Family, on Truth, Love, and How I Met My 35 Siblings. I'll read that again for you just in case you think I made a mistake, because you probably thought I made a mistake there, or maybe my producer typed it wrong on the script in front of me. Her book is called Normal Family, on Truth, Love, and How I Met My 35 Siblings. And she joins me on the line. And I hope I pronounced your name properly. It's Chrysta Bilton. Bilton, sorry. Am I pronouncing your name properly?
It's perfect. Thanks for that wonderful introduction.
35 siblings. People would think that I mispronounced it or said something wrong there. How is it even possible to have 35 siblings? But you're going to tell me the incredible story that's in your book and how you ended up in that situation.
Yeah, I think we're up to the 40s now, actually, and it's possible that it's in the hundreds. So,
God only knows.
I have to have a revised second edition.
Yeah. How many have you actually met, by the way?
I've met a few dozen.
Okay. And do they all look like you?
They all look a lot like me.
Okay.
They look more like the little sister that I grew up with, Caitlin. Because she looks like my father. But yeah, the similarities, both in quirks and personality, as well as physical attributes, are truly incredible. And
they are, because I can tell you, I met my sister for the first time when I was 52, because we were born in an orphanage. And I remember when I met her, we went out to a restaurant and we went out to a bar and a nightclub afterwards. And I'm looking at her going, do I recognize things that I do? And she did things that I did, like stir my soup a certain way and slurp the soup a certain way and put her napkin a certain... So she did things similar to me, little idiosyncrasies. So I'm sure you noticed that. But most of my listeners are now thinking to themselves, we don't care now. We want to know how she has that many siblings.
Yeah. Do you want me to start at the top?
Start at the top. Go right back to the start.
All right. Well, it was the early 1980s in Los Angeles, and my mother was this really eccentric, larger-than-life woman. She had been involved in several cults. She had grown up in a very sort of prominent political family. My great-grandfather was the governor of California. There's also a much darker past of alcoholism and all this other stuff. But she went out and was part of all these different religious cults. And then spent a lot of time searching, I think, because it was also a very hard time to be a gay woman or gay person, for that matter, even in L.A., which you think of as so liberal. So when she finally decided in her 30s, after battling and getting sober of drug addiction, and she decided she wanted to start a family, but she didn't know a single gay person who had kids, and she didn't know how to go about doing that. And so she went on a comical manhunt for a father figure, which I document in the book. And that led her to meeting the man who would become my dad when he walked into a fancy Beverly Hills hair salon and was the most handsome man she had ever seen.
Okay.
And she took one look at him, and she tells the story that she knew that this was the man that she was going to take out to a restaurant and offer a couple thousands of dollars in cash to conceive me with a turkey baster. And so
she thought this guy's going to have good looking sperm. So
this guy has good looking sperm. She did some investigations. She thought his family history was great. They both bonded over New Age religion, and he agreed to do it. And so I think he thought this was a one-time one-time deal.
$2,000's
And
okay.
he made-
2,000's okay, isn't it? For, a little drop of sperm. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he thought it was a great deal. And she made him swear he would never do this for anyone else.
And he did swear he'd never do it for anybody else.
He did swear because, it's not often that a vivacious blonde in a hair salon offers you a couple thousands of dollars for such a small thing. He thought it was an absurd request, so he agreed. And then after that, she took him to what was just then a fertility bank, but later became one of the largest sperm banks in the world. And she took him there to have him tested for STDs and to check that he was fertile. And while he was sitting getting his blood drawn, he saw all these men lined up to donate sperm. And he said to the nurse when my mom wasn't in the room, "Wait, you mean they make a living doing that?" And she said, "Yes, So
do they?
So for the next,
sorry, I'm looking at my producer going, do they make a living doing that?
A very meager living, but
okay.
as I said, my father was into New Age religion, and he was sort of a hippie who had come from a waspy family and wanted a simple life, surfing in LA, and he didn't need much, and so he started doing that, and he did that 3 times a week for almost a decade. And while that was happening, my mom, of course, didn't know, and
she thought she was the only one. Yeah.
Yes, and she felt she really felt a lot of shame and guilt around not giving us a father figure. So after I was born, she wound up compelling him into our life as dad financially. So she sort of paid him to play the role. It's like he'd come over for a birthday party and she would hand him $100.
No. So she was paying him maintenance. That seems like it's the wrong way around.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And so why, and he never told her that he was doing this at the same time. So then in my mid-20s, after a very colorful life, the book is really about me growing up with my mom, because we had a very, very colorful life together. But in my mid-20s, due to a truly wild set of circumstances that involved me possibly dating my half-brother, all of it came out that this was something he had done professionally and that there were potentially hundreds of siblings.
I want to go back to when she was hiring him out to come to birthday parties and things like that. Did he pay you? Did she ever pay him to bring you to the zoo or something like that, or bring you to the cinema, or what? Did he pay you to bring you on days out or something like that? Did she do that as well?
I had a relationship with my dad when I was younger, and she denies that she had this financial relationship with him to compel him into my life, but he was the one that had sort of told me that basically when I was reporting out my book. And so I'm not sure how direct it was every time. He called it a donation, not a payment. But I think, I did spend time with him, but not usually. He was, as I said, he was quite eccentric, so he would usually come to us. I don't know that she trusted
your mother was quite.
Me out.
Yeah, she was quite wealthy, and I was reading that your mother, obviously, she was hanging out with people who were in the big time. Like she meditated with the Beatles and was dating Ava Gabor, which I think Ava Gabor was Zsa Zsa Gabor's sister.
That's right.
Yeah, so she was kind of well in with all the celebs, so she was clearly making a few quid, or she was living that type of lifestyle, certainly, anyway. And, when I was reading there, it says in the Sunday Times, it said one of the maddest memoirs you'll ever read. And it certainly sounds like one of the maddest memoirs. So after the point when you found out, because you nearly ended up dating your own brother probably, where did you go from that point then?
Yeah. So to your point, she was very well off for some periods of our life, but then we would also be sort of on the verge of homelessness at other points because she, in the same way that sort of her drug addiction and alcoholism came and went throughout my life, also the money came and went. So sometimes she would be, one of the key people in a huge pyramid scheme that made us a lot of money, and we would be living with multiple cars and a huge mansion, and she'd be hanging out with these celebrities. But other times, we were on food stamps and didn't know where to go. So it was
living in motels.
Yeah, with friends, yeah, mostly. But so in terms of the discovery, so in my teenage years, my father had some mental health challenges. So he wound up sort of he wound up homeless. And so that was a tricky thing to navigate because so we sort of stopped having a relationship at a certain point because it was so complicated. And then I started dating this boy, and the way that my mother found out about all the siblings was because my father called her on Valentine's Day to say, "Happy Valentine's. I have a surprise for you. Go get the New York Times." And she said, "What is this, Jeffrey? Why go get the New York Times?" And he said, just go to the newsstand and get it. So my mom drove over to the local newsstand, and there on the cover of the Sunday paper of one of the most read newspapers in the world was a picture of my dad with his arm around a girl who looked exactly like me. And the headline was something like, "Hi, you're my," it had to do with her going to meet her father, the first anonymous sperm donor in the world to break his anonymity and welcome his biological donor conceived children to come meet him in sunny California. And so that was the first time my mother realized what he'd done when she read that story. And she had a complete nervous breakdown. But she decided she was never going to tell us this story. Somehow she was going to keep this away from us.
So she knew at that point you had God knows how many half brothers and sisters. She knew that she kind of knew.
That's right.
Yeah.
But then it was only through another set of circumstances that she realized the guy I was seeing was probably one of them, that she had to tell.
And how did she think that?
Later.
Why did she think that? Did he kind of look like you or something like that?
Sounds weird. Yes, he certainly looked like my father. It is incredibly strange to talk about, as you can imagine, but it's such a long story. All of the siblings started meeting, me and my little sister. So I had also had a little sister that was also conceived using my father. And, unbeknownst to both of us, all of these siblings had started to meet. They started a Facebook group where they were all meeting online. Then when they connected with my father, they started to meet him. But my mother was trying to manage all of this and have us not find out. Okay. And then she basically served my father with all this confidentiality paperwork, and she got put in touch with someone else who was involved in the story somehow. And that person found out that there was a set of twins from a very famous family that were also my father's sperm. And the boy I was seeing had two twin sisters.
Oh no.
And my mother, when she heard about, it's such a convoluted story. You'll have to read the book for that one.
I'm kind of wondering, by the way, is all that kind of stuff painful for you, or is it just bizarre? Do you find it difficult?
It was incredibly painful at a different stage of my life.
Yeah.
And now I think I can laugh about it and find the humanity in it. And, the interesting thing is when you opened, you said, we definitely have never known someone with this many siblings. And while that I'm sure is true, one thing that has been really fascinating about publishing the book is how many people I've heard from who have discovered family members through these, DNA testing websites.
I was going to say, they'd be good websites to go to, like MyHeritage or whatever it is, those type of websites, and I'm sure you would have lots of results.
We don't have an Irish sibling yet, so I highly recommend that all of your listeners go get a test because I would love to have someone to visit in Ireland.
Maybe my mother, because from what I believe, I don't know I know who she was, but I believe I remember there was a spate of about 4 or 5 years, and somebody turned around to me and say, "Oh, by the way, you have another brother." And I go, "Oh, really?" That's really interesting. So maybe I don't know. Maybe we're loosely connected somewhere along the line.
Maybe. But it's a lot of. I also hear from a lot of adoptees because I think that there's a lot of thematic crossover about questions around identity and family relationships. Like, what do these relationships mean when you're biologically connected to someone, but you didn't grow up with them? I just think that they're questions that are quite universal, even if the story is very specific.
Did you, when you were about to date your half-brother or possibly your half-brother, did you feel something? People often wonder, is it nature or nurture? Do you think that people recognize if somebody's related to them?
Well, I certainly didn't recognize that he might be related to me, because that would have been, questionable. But certainly that was a painful and confusing realization to have.
I would imagine. Yeah.
That person also didn't know that they might be conceived with a sperm donor. So it was a very complex thing because I, first of all, had to break up with this person. I had to, like an investigative reporter, figure out, are they in fact my brother? And then also I didn't want to share this crisis I was having with them because it would create their own personal crisis beyond even our relationship.
Yeah, it wouldn't be fair to tell them just in case they didn't know or didn't want to know.
But it's incredible. I mean, sperm banks are still not regulated in the United States. So you could so my circumstance is not that unusual. There are quite a few pods of donor conceived siblings who were all conceived using the same donor. And the cryobank.
There are guys. I think I did interview a guy going back a while ago. I think he was in New York and he was celebrating the fact that he fathered 100 children or something like that. He was also a sperm donor. And I find it quite strange as a conservative, I'm a bit of a conservative myself, that there would be no register because you don't want half brothers and sisters meeting and marrying each other. You know what I mean?
Yes, and my story shows that it's very possible that could happen. It's not just science fiction.
No, it's a real thing. Yeah. So we don't know how many half brothers and sisters you have, but you're aware of 35 of them. You've met 35.
I'm aware of, sort of I think we're in the mid 40s now.
Okay.
And we're quite an we suspect many more, but we're quite an early batch because he was donating in the early 80s to early 90s. And a lot of the kids conceived at that time were through heterosexual couples where the man was infertile. And they were advised at that time by the medical community to not tell their children. So most of the half siblings that I have were raised by a man and woman and never told that they had a sperm donor. So it's only by randomly taking a DNA test that they discover that this is a part of them. Whereas nowadays, it's much more common for parents to tell their children. Not just if they're in a gay family where it's an obvious question you would ask, where does my...
It'd be very obvious, all right, yeah.
But now it's really considered sort of the right thing to do to tell your kids. But back then it wasn't.
Yeah.
And it's the same with adoptees. I think that a lot of adoptees were not always told from the beginning.
That's right, yeah. Well, I wasn't told until I was 14 or 15 or whatever it was. So I understand that. So what's the next step?
In my life, in
your search for more. I'm assuming, are you still searching for more?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote. I felt really compelled to write the book because I think that there are a lot of universal themes in it. Just coming from a complex family, even beyond sort of having unsuspecting brothers and sisters, I think. Coming from a line of where there might be mental health challenges or addiction issues, I think those stories are quite universal. And I've always loved memoir as a genre. And so it's been really wonderful to put it out into the world and reach people in different countries and sort of, I have my inbox is full of stories that could each be their own books. And, so I'm not rushing to write another book anytime soon.
There's a picture of you, actually, I'm looking here from the book, which you're sitting on the floor with a number of your siblings, not them all, obviously, because you'd need a conference room for them all, but a number of them. And I'm wondering, when you're dating, I don't know what your personal situation is now, whether you're married or whether you're single or whatever it is.
I'm married. I have 2 kids.
Okay, so when you were dating after that guy even, were you always cautious then when you were dating somebody, thinking, does he look like me? I wonder, has he got a birthmark on his left leg? You know what I mean? I mean, were you always conscious when you were dating somebody?
That's I married, my husband we did his DNA test and he's something like 98% Ashkenazi Jew. And I know that I have absolutely zero Ashkenazi in my blood, so I'm happy to report that I know that I married a non-sibling. But I mean, it's definitely something on my mind. You know, sometimes I'll see actors on TV who are younger than me, and I will think, wow, they look a lot like the sibling.
Yeah.
Or people walking, you know, siblings of mine will text. We have this group WhatsApp or group, you know, we have all these different group chats, and they'll text like a picture of someone in a coffee shop, and they'll be like, I'm sure it's one of us. So it's definitely something that's on our mind.
And do your kids know that they have like, you know, a million aunties and uncles? Are your kids aware of that?
You know, when they come over, we joke and give them sort of uncle names. I think of them a little bit like distant cousins more than a sibling relationship.
Okay.
But we're very open with them. Yes, they're still sort of too small to really register what that means. But
okay.
I will share it with them when they're older, for sure.
That'll be mind-blowing for them if they're doing their family tree when they get older. Because if they do the MyHeritage thing then, or, you know, they do their DNA with whoever, you know, they're going to have, like, normally most people kind of get a page of results. You kind of get about 100 pages of results.
It's so true. It's so true. And the interesting thing is usually we find siblings at certain times of year.
Yeah.
Which are basically when the websites are advertising deals.
Yeah.
So around the holidays and Valentine's Day is usually when we get a new batch.
A new batch. I signed up with one of them going back a few years ago too. And there are certain times of the year you get the emails in the inbox. We've just found somebody else. And I'm going, okay.
It's true. And it's interesting. They must know how many family crises they're beginning, because they don't tell you that you've just matched with a sibling. They send you an email that says, you may have someone who's between a sibling and a first cousin.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of their soft landing, but we've developed all kinds of protocols for which sibling reaches out and how they explain the situation, because it's quite a big thing to take in.
Well, look, the Sunday Times wasn't lying when it said it was one of the maddest memoirs you'll ever read. It said it's a beautiful, warm, funny book and as a testament to human resilience, forgiveness and humour. It is also a love letter to an extraordinary mother, because you talk very fondly about your own mother as well. And you know, it sounds like a wonderful read that I will be having a read of myself when I get a chance. And it's available, I'm assuming, in all the usual places. In Amazon and everywhere else. And for people who don't remember what I called it again, because I know it's an unusual name, it's called Normal Family, on Truth, Love and How I Met My 35 Siblings. And the author, who I'm going to pronounce her name wrong again, is Chrysta Bilton. Is it Bilton or Bilton?
It's Chrysta Bilton.
There you go. Chrysta Bilton. Chrysta, I do apologise for pronouncing your name wrong. I was highly entertained.
I didn't even hear it. It was perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I was highly
entertained, but also highly sad that you would have went through a painful time at that time. And I hope we weren't too flippant in the interview towards it, but I thought it was a really interesting but bizarre story. Listen, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
There you go. Wonderful book. If you want to get it, it's called it's called Normal Family, on Truth, Love and How I Met My 35 Siblings.
Wow. Real people, real opinions, real talk radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.